Hello!
And welcome to Larry's Library.
Hello, welcome to Larry's Library. We're continuing with Swiss Family Robinson. They've named all their places, they're settling in, and now we start with chapter 18, The Tortoise Harnessed. The wind was favorable and briskly swelled our sail. The sea was calm and we advanced at a considerable rate. Fritz had for some time fixed his eyes on something of a large size which was floating on the water, and he now desired me to take the glass and see what it could be. I soon perceived that it was a tortoise, which had fallen asleep in the sun on the surface of the water. No sooner had Fritz learned this than he entreated me to steer softly within view of so extraordinary a creature. I readily consented, but as his back was towards me and the sail between us, I did not observe his motions till a violent jerk of the boat, a sudden turning of the windlass, and then a second jerk, accompanied by a rapid motion of the boat, gave me the necessary explanation. "For heaven's sake, what are you about, Fritz?" exclaimed I, somewhat alarmed. "I have caught him! I touched him!" cried Fritz, without hearing one word I had been saying. "The tortoise is ours! It cannot escape, father! Is not this, then, a valuable prize? For it will furnish dinners for us all for many weeks." I soon perceived that the harpoon had caught the animal, which, feeling itself wounded, thus agitated the vessel in its endeavors to get away. I quickly pulled down the sail, and seizing a hatchet, sprang to the boat's head to cut the rope and let the harpoon and the tortoise go. But Fritz caught hold of my arm, conjuring me to wait a moment, and not so hastily bring upon him the mortification of losing, at one stroke, the harpoon, the rope, and the tortoise. He proposed watching himself, with the hatchet in his hand, to cut the rope suddenly should any sign of danger appear. And I yielded to his entreaties. Everybody wave to Uncle Carrie, wave to Uncle Kevin. Thus, then, drawn along by the tortoise, we proceeded with a hazardous rapidity. I soon observed that the creature was making for the sea. I therefore again hoisted the sail, and as the wind was to the land and very brisk, the tortoise found resistance of no avail. He accordingly fell into the track of the current and drew us straight towards our usual place of landing, and by good fortune without striking upon any of the rocks. We, however, did not disembark without one difficult adventure. The state of the tide was such as to throw us upon a sandbank. We were at this time within a gunshot of the shore. The boat, though driven with violence, remained upright in the sand. I stepped into the water, which did not reach far above my knees, for the purpose of conferring upon our conductor his just reward for the alarm he had caused us, when he suddenly gave a plunge and then disappeared. Following the rope, I presently saw the tortoise stretched at length at the bottom of the water, where it was so shallow that I soon found means to put an end to his pain by cutting off his head with the hatchet. Being now near Tent House, Fritz gave a halloo and fired a gun to apprise our relatives that we were not only arrived, but arrived in triumph. This soon produced the desired effect. The mother and her 3 young ones soon appeared, running towards us, upon which Fritz jumped out of the boat, placed the head of our sea prize on the muzzle of his gun, and walked to shore, which I reached at the same moment. I requested my wife to go with 2 of the younger boys to Falcon's Stream and fetch the sledge and the beasts of burden, that we might see at least a part of our booty from the ship put safely under shelter the same evening. A tempest, or even the tide, might sweep away the whole during the night. We took every precaution in our power against the latter danger by fixing the boat and the raft now, at the time of its reflux, as securely as we could without an anchor. While we were employed on this scheme, the sledge arrived, and we placed the tortoise upon it, and also some articles of light weight, such as mattresses, pieces of linen, etc. Our first concern on reaching our abode was the tortoise, which we immediately turned on his back, that we might strip off the shell and make use of some of the flesh while it was fresh. Taking my hatchet, I separated the upper and under shell all round, which were joined together by cartilages. The upper shell of the tortoise is extremely convex. The under, on the contrary, is nearly flat. I cut away as much of the flesh of the animal as was sufficient for a meal, and laid the rest carefully on the under shell, which served as a dish, recommending to my wife to cook what I had cut off on the other shell with no other seasoning than a little salt, and pledged myself that she would produce a luxurious dish. Fritz: I thought, Father, of cleaning the shell thoroughly and fixing it by the side of our river and keeping it always full of pure water for my mother's use when she has to wash the linen to cook our victuals. Excellent, excellent, my boy. All honor to the founder of the pure water tub. This is what I call thinking for the general good. And we will take care to execute the idea as soon as we can prepare some clay as a solid foundation for its bottom. And Ernest said, when the water tub is complete, I will put some roots I have found to soak a little in it, for they are now extremely dry. I do not exactly know what they are. They look something like the radish or horseradish, but the plant from which I took them was almost the size of a bush. If my suspicion is right, you have made a beneficial discovery, which, with the assistance of our own wild roots, may furnish us the means of existence as long as we may remain in this island. I think your roots are manioc, of which the natives of the West Indies make a sort of bread or cake, which they call cassava. But we must first carry the production through a certain preparation, without which it possesses pernicious properties. There's a little alliteration for you. Possesses pernicious properties. Try to find the same place and bring a sufficient quantity for our first experiment. We had finished unloading the sledge, and I bade the 3 eldest boys accompany me to fetch another load before it should be dark. Having reached the raft, we took from it as many effects as the sledge could hold or the animals could draw along. One object of my attention was to secure 2 chests which contained the clothes of my family. I reckoned also on finding in one of the chests some books on interesting subjects, and principally a large, handsomely printed Bible. I added to these 4 cart wheels and a hand mill for grinding, which, now that we had discovered the manioc, I considered of signal importance. These and a few other articles completed our present load. On our return to Falcon's Nest, we found my wife looking anxiously for our arrival and ready with the welcome she had promised of an ample and agreeable repast. Before she had well examined our new stores, she drew me, with one of her sweetest smiles, by the arm. "Step this way," said she, and leading to the shade of a tree, "this is the work I performed in your absence," pointing to a large cask half sunk in the ground and the rest covered over with branches of trees. She then applied a small corkscrew to the side and, filling the shell of a coconut with the contents, presented it to me. I found the liquor equal to the best canary I had ever tasted. "How then," said I, "have you performed this new miracle? I cannot believe the enchanted bag produced it." "Not exactly," replied she, "for this time it was an obliging white wave which threw it on shore. I took a little ramble in your absence yesterday to see what I could find, and, well, my trouble was rewarded. The boys ran for the sledge and had but little difficulty in getting the cask to Falcon's Stream, where we dug this place in the earth to keep it cool." My wife now proposed that all should be regaled with some of the delicious beverage. My own share so invigorated me that I found myself able to complete my day's work by drawing up the mattresses we had brought from the ship to our chamber in the tree by means of a pulley. When I had laid them along to advantage, they looked so inviting that I could scarcely resist my desire of at once committing myself to the kind relief they seemed to offer to my exhausted strength. But now the savory smell of the tortoise laid claim to my attention. I hastened down, and we all partook heartily of the luxurious treat. We returned thanks to God, and speedily retired to taste the blessing of sound repose upon the said mattresses. So that's the end of chapter 18. We're going to do chapter 19. Chapter 19. Another trip to the wreck, baking. After breakfast the next morning, we returned to the seaside to complete the unloading of the raft, that it might be ready for sea on the flowing of the tide. We were not long in taking 2 cargoes to Falcon's Stream. At our last trip, the water was nearly up to our craft. I sent back my wife and the boys, and remained with Fritz till we were quite afloat, when, observing Jack still loitering near, I guessed at his wish, and consented to his embarking with us. Shortly after, the tide was high enough for us to row off. Instead of steering for Safety Bay to moor our vessels there securely, I was tempted by a fresh sea breeze to go out again to the wreck. But it was too late to undertake much, and I was unwilling to cause my dear partner uneasiness by passing another night on board. I therefore determined to bring away only what could be obtained with ease and speed. We searched hastily through the ship for any trifling articles that might be readily removed. Jack was up and down everywhere, at a loss what to select, and when I saw him again, he drew a wheelbarrow after him, quick, shouting that he had found a vehicle for carrying our wild roots. But Fritz next disclosed still better news, which was that he had discovered behind the bulkhead amidship a pinnace, that is, a small craft, the forepart of which is square, taken to pieces with all its appurtenances and even 2 small guns for its defense. This intelligence so delighted me that I quitted everything else to run to the bulkhead when I was convinced of the truth of the lad's assertion. But I instantly perceived that to put it together and launch it would be an Herculean task. I collected various utensils, a copper boiler, some plates of iron, tobacco graters, 2 grinding stones, a small barrel of gunpowder, and another full of flints, which I much valued. Jack's barrow was not forgotten. 2 more were afterwards found and added, with straps belonging to them. All these articles were hurried into the boat, and we re-embarked with speed to avoid the land wind that rises in the evening. Arrived at Falcon's Stream, my wife exhibited a good store of tuberous roots which she had got in during our absence, and a quantity of the roots I had taken for manioc, and in which I was not mistaken. "But now," said I, "for some supper and repose, and if my little workmen should be industriously inclined tomorrow, I shall reward them with the novelty of a new trade to be learned." This did not fail to excite the curiosity of all, but I kept my word and made them wait till the following day for the explanation I had to give. I waked the boys very early, reminding them that I had promised to teach them a new trade. "What is it? What is it?" exclaimed they all at once, springing suddenly out of bed and hurrying on their clothes. "It is the art of the baker, my boys. Hand me those iron plates that we brought yesterday from the vessel, and the tobacco graters also, and we will make our experiment. Ernest, bring hither the roots you found, but first, my dear, I must request that you make me a small bag of a piece of strong wrapper cloth." My wife set instantly to work to oblige me, but having no great confidence in my talents for making either bread or cakes, she first filled the copper boiler with roots and put it on the fire, that we might not be without something to eat at dinner time. In the meanwhile, I spread a piece of coarse linen on the ground and assembled my young ones round me. I gave each of the boys a grater and showed him at the same time how to rest it on the linen and then to grate the roots of the manioc. In a short time each had produced a considerable heap of a substance somewhat resembling pollard. By this time my wife had completed the bag. I had it well filled with what we called our pollard, and she closed it securely by sewing up the end. I was now to contrive a kind of press. I cut a long, straight, stout branch from a neighboring tree and stripped it of the bark. I then placed a plank across the table we had fixed between the arched roots of our tree, and which was exactly the right height for my purpose, and on this I laid the bag. I put other planks again upon the bag, and then covered all with a large branch, the thickest extremity of which I inserted under an arch, while to the other, which projected beyond the planks, I suspended all sorts of heavy substances, such as lead, our largest hammers, and bars of iron, which, acting with great force as a press on the bag of manioc, caused the sap it contains to issue in streams which flowed plentifully on the ground. We then opened the bag and took out a small quantity of the pollard, which already was dry enough. We stirred the rest about with a stick and then replaced it under the press. The next thing was to fix one of our iron plates, which was of a round form and a little hollow, so as to rest upon 2 blocks of stone at a distance from each other. Under this we lighted a large fire, and when the iron plate was completely heated, we placed a portion of the dough upon it with a wooden spade. As soon as the cake began to be brown underneath, it was turned, that the other side might be baked also. When the cake was cold, we broke some of it into crumbs and gave it to two of the fowls, and a larger piece to the monkey, who nibbled it with a perfect relish, making all the time 1,000 grimaces, while the boys stood by envying the preference he enjoyed. The first thing after dinner was to visit our fowls. Those which had eaten the manioc were in excellent condition, and no less so was the monkey. "Now then, to the bakehouse, young ones," said I, "as fast as you can scamper." The grated manioc was soon emptied out of the bag, a large fire was quickly lighted, and I placed the boys where a flat surface had been prepared for them, and gave to each a plate of iron and the quantity of a coconut full to make a cake apiece, and they were to try who could succeed the best. They were ranged in a half circle round me, that they might observe how I proceeded, and adopt the same method for themselves. Tara, get out of that closet. The result was not discouraging for a first experiment, though it must be confessed we were now and then so unlucky as to burn a cake, But there was not a greater number of these than served to feed the pigeons and the fowls, which hovered around us to claim their share of the treat. The rest of the day was employed by the boys in making several turns with their wheelbarrows, and by myself in different arrangements, in which the ass and our sledge had a principal share, both being employed in drawing to Tent House the remaining articles we had brought from the ship. And that is the end of chapter 19. Tomorrow will be chapter 20, The Cracker and the Pinnace. And there's a picture of that. There's going to be an explosion. Yeah. This has been Larry's Library.
Can I
Thank you. Yeah, you can see.
Bye.
Bye.